Got it.
What's up? Welcome to our Unnamed Fitness podcast. It's for our members here at CrossFit South Bend, but we're putting our stuff out to everyone. I am Brandon Wilton, and who are you?
Carl Case.
Yeah. We're the owners and operators of CrossFit South Bend. And we elaborated this on our last podcast a little bit more, but one of our goals here is to kind of serve as a beacon for truth, or a place to have discussions around what might be best for you in fitness and health, and kind of deliver that to you or not. I think both the client and the coach learns from this process. And we get questions, we get a lot of them. So we started this to answer these questions with our own perspective. Today we're going to be taking on some fitness myths. I'm not going to get too much further into that right now because I feel like we got a lot to say. But if you have questions or topics you'd like to see covered, or even more myths you'd like to see covered, feel free to email me, Brandon at CrossFitSouthBend.com, and I'll kind of add it to the roster. So I'll go ahead and go into some of my thoughts here. When we were looking to chat about fitness myths, we realized that some of the questions we get, or a lot of the questions we get, are very CrossFit centric, rightfully so, because we're a CrossFit gym. And that brought up a few topics. What is CrossFit and what do we do here, and how that might be perceived as different relative to maybe some other affiliates as well. And I wanted to make this more broad as well too. I would say more broad, not just CrossFit, but like what are just good practices in fitness in general for some of these myths. And when we were preparing some of the show notes, it became apparent like we could talk for hours just on one myth, and it brings about a lot of subtopics again. So if anyone wants to request a little bit more depth of any of these, please just let us know. So anything on your end, Carl? Any thoughts on that? You want to add anything?
No, not right now. We'll dive into it more, and like you said, we're going to give a lot of context to a lot of these things, and kind of create these as each one from a situational standpoint, and kind of once again remember the lens that we're looking through things, and we're going to set the stage with that. I think with what we have coming up now, with kind of what is CrossFit. So I'll let you kind of define that, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah. Well, we'll let CrossFit define that, right? So what is CrossFit? It's what CrossFit says they are, what affiliates make it out to be, what the client thinks it is, right? Like each one of those things, I feel like I've seen an old meme like that before, the picture panel, right? Constantly varied functional movements performed at high intensity. That's the elevator pitch, right? So constantly varied, constantly changing movements, and they're functional, they say, which are, you perform in your day-to-day, and they're performed at high intensity. Go to CrossFit.com now, and they'll constantly rotate some of the what is CrossFit, things on there. But then you understand how an affiliation works, right? And we've been an affiliate for 14 years now.
Yeah. So I affiliated in 2008. So yeah.
Yeah, we've been doing it since 2007.
Yeah.
So, understanding how that works is the original model was empirically driven, right? It was the cream rises to the top. If you do whatever you want out there, we'll protect the CrossFit name. You can use the branding, you can use that stuff, but you can do whatever you want. And if what you're doing works, we'll bring it into our own. And I think it's a little different since then, because you kind of have to be able to stand your ground on something as far as a product is. But like the affiliation means we can kind of still do whatever we want, right?
Yeah, and there's good and bads in that, as we'll kind of touch on later, right? I don't think the general public only knows that an affiliate model is different than a franchise model. So when they see CrossFit, right, it's this broad encompassing thing that they think that all these CrossFits are these, but there really aren't any standardized business practices or even training methods or anything like that. Like you said, you take your interpretation of CrossFit and you apply that to how you think is going to best serve your population, which an untrained market, right? That leads to some problems or maybe misconceptions like that we'll dive into a little bit later. Whereas like a franchise like McDonald's, right? When you go here in Indiana to get a Big Mac, or you go to California to get a Big Mac, it's going to be the same product. Whereas you can go to us, you can go to the other ones in the different areas, and they're all going to be different CrossFit experiences. It's their interpretation of the methodology.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've seen a lot of affiliates over the years. And I mean, one of our differentiators with us is that this is what we do. This is what we do professionally. This is what we do full time. We have a full-time staff dedicated to learning and teaching and creating programs and moving and understanding fitness better each day so that we can serve our clients. And yeah, in an affiliation, I would say that I'm not going to say that I can't speak for all of them, right? They're not all hobbyists, but you get a lot of hobbyists. And it's easy to open a CrossFit gym. And to CrossFit's credit too, they've been putting out good practices and support for business and program design. And they've really started, I feel like over the last couple of years, they've been reaching out quite a bit more under new leadership as well too. So good on them for that. But yeah, why get into the conversation around the affiliates? I think it's important to know that, you know, everyone can kind of do what they want, and other affiliates and how they program. Number one, like some of them will use the theoretical template for CrossFit programming. Okay. So for those of you who don't know what that is, day one, monostructural. So run, row, bike, swim, you know, that kind of stuff, cyclical modalities, right? Day two, monostructural and weightlifting, MW, right? So maybe it's row and power cleans. Day three, monostructural weightlifting, gymnastics, some body weight movement, right? So maybe it's a run, kettlebell swing, and burpees, right? So like they rotate through this MW, MWG, GW, GWM, you know, so on and so forth. They rotate through. That was their templated thing. And as far as I know, they still use that, correct?
Yeah, I think our most recent renewal, that was still kind of the basic template that they used as far as what they taught in the certifications.
Mm-hmm. And they had a pool of movements, essentially. It wasn't just like you use a movement to apply for a particular reason at a particular time with context. It was like, here's a pool of functional movements, use these, and you check them off. And obviously other, you know, I think it was just the base start in L1s for people and L2s for people to understand how to program a little bit better. But that's essentially what they would do. It's like they've got their movements that they do. Second way, people outsource it. So Mayhem, Think Tank, whatever, Invictus, all these places, they outsource from other places. And I've got my own thoughts on that, you know, but another way is that they program themselves. So, which is what we've done for 14 years. We program our own workouts for our population. When you say our own population, we will run assessments, and then we will watch people out on the floor and see what types of people do we have, what types, I would say types of people, but our target market and their goals. If you put competitive people on your website and you put in competitive movements and you make these workouts bangers and you kill them every day, you're probably going to get that type of people, and people looking for health and longevity are eventually going to get spun out. Or it's like the Russian model, right? You take 1,000 eggs to, what is it, to make an omelet?
So, break quite a few eggs and make an omelet.
Yeah. But we program ourselves. And, you know, so everyone has their own definition of how they're applying CrossFit. Not everyone uses that same style of programming. But what we do is we are looking for, within the context of group, the best amount of, you say performance or longevity, sustainability, and health. Okay. So performance is relative to where you're at, right? I wouldn't even know if performance is the right word for ours, but I would say definitely like, as fit as you can be in a group program and being able to sustain that over time. You know, ours has lower complexity than a lot of, I would say a lot of CrossFit gyms, and we'll get into that in a minute. It's polarized. So you'll see maybe resistance on one day, and the next day is conditioning or aerobic work, and then resistance, aerobic work, or resistance, aerobic work. Because you have to make assumptions that people are training 7 days a week, They're not, but if I put in and I program something that is not very complimentary multiple days in a row, then that person that came in on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is going to be smoked, right? So you have to make some assumptions when you're programming. Olympic weightlifting and complex gymnastics movements are scarce within our program design, within our group program design. Olympic weightlifting is fun, but it's earned by developing your absolute strength and flexibility to the point where you can safely express it. So that, I would say, with our population is not for the majority, it is for the minority. Most of the stuff you'll see in our programming is for skill acquisition. Just taste it, feel the pattern with very, very light weights. See if you like it, see if you don't. And there are guidelines around that usually. So can you do a full range of motion squat? Do you have symmetry, stable foot, at good absolute strength numbers? Can you do pull-ups and push-ups and, strict dips? Do you have some of these prerequisites to now load? And then complex gymnastics movements, some of these, they're not needed. Muscle ups are not needed for your day-to-day function. I can't remember the last time I've had to muscle up in real life. Carl, have you had to muscle up lately? In your 30 times? Yeah, you had to do it.
That one time you're going to need it.
Yeah. However, where that stuff exists within our building is in our personalized fitness. So we do program, and a lot of people, this is a whole nother thing for another time, talking about OPEX and in our journey with OPEX, individualized, personalized fitness, where it is not about the group, it is about the single person and their assessment and who they are and what they're capable of. And you'll get, you want complex gymnastics movements and Olympic weightlifting. If it's a part of your goals and you've earned it, great. And if it's part of your goals and you haven't earned it, we'll help you understand how to earn it, right? But the end result, going back to, well, maybe we save the competitive stuff for the high intensity stuff. We'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
Myths. So now that we've laid some groundwork on kind of what CrossFit is, what we are, and what we've done, one of the first myths is that CrossFit, well, I've heard it both ways. CrossFit isn't good for weight loss and CrossFit is good for weight loss. This one specifically, CrossFit is not good for weight loss. Okay. Let's use our definition of what we do for CrossFit. And then let's have a conversation around, what would you do if you wanted to lose weight? The first thing, who are you and how much weight you have to lose, right, Carl? Like the big difference between going 8 to 6% body fat and 25 to 20, and are you looking for health or losing weight? Because abs don't mean health and some body fat is healthy. So that's a different conversation. There's some subtopics there, but yeah, I think what we can do is say, what does it take to lose weight sustainably over time? And then you can just mirror that against whatever program that you're doing, right? If you're listening to this and you're not, one of our members, you can just, mirror it from there. What's your top 3 on weight loss, Carl? You got I know it's on this list most likely.
Yeah. As far as tops, I would say sleep is up there as far as something that we're going to need, right? We're looking to recover and just have good hormonal profiles. That's going to be a great thing that's going to be in there. Next would be probably, we're gotta look at food, right? So whether it's the food selection you have or the food practice you have within that, right? Because you can't ignore calories in and calories out. There is some sort of component to that, right? It's not the end all be all, but it has to be. And then I think just movement, right? You need to have some sort of thermogenic effect, right? Kind of create that. So I'd say, I guess we sleep, food quality, and then I guess just movement would be mine. What about you?
Yeah. Gosh, is it a cop out to say just BLGs because it encompasses so much, right?
Yeah, I guess what are BLGs?
Yeah, basic lifestyle guidelines. Stress management. So, understand stressors, environmental stress, psychological stress. Your job, your whatever demons going on in your head, right? Your shampoo that you're using, your food that you're eating, all of that stuff can be a stressor, right? Your workouts that you're doing as stressors.
It's important too, because your body can't stress is stress right to the body.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Stress is
don't-
stress. Yeah. And you have a stress cup. That's always the best way of looking at it, right? The stress cup, and then you're adding in stress and then it overflows eventually, right? Um, but yeah, basic lifestyle guidelines: sleep and have good sleep hygiene. Is it cold? Is it dark? Is it unbroken? Is it not from 3 a.m. to, you know, whenever a.m., right? So like, does it have a good rhythm to it? Is it the same time and same wake up so you go down, wake up at the same time? Food and food hygiene. How's your gut health? You're not on the toilet pooping like you're a paper shredder, just all over the place. It's just like, you have good bowel movements. For Google Bristol stool chart, I think it's a number 4, right? Number 4 is that good when you're on the toilet. That's where you want to chew your food really well. Moving every day, drinking enough water, getting sunshine, having rhythm. So not only do you wake up and go to sleep at the same time, but you're eating your meals at the same time, and all that kind of stuff. I think that encompasses a lot of them right there. Yeah, outside of that, you mentioned finding a balance of quality and quantity that works really well for you and your goals too. You can't ignore the laws of, thermogenesis, right? Yeah. So like, you need to have enough quality and enough quantity and a balance that works for you and your goals and what you want to get out of it. And then your training needs to, quality strength training and easy, sustainable aerobic work is a good way of looking at it. But if you had almost like looked at a control board, right, with little levers of each one of these, each one, I mean, you can get away with less strength training and more aerobic work and a little less sleep and a little, like you're just tweaking it just to find out what your output is right there. But if you're going through this list and you're like, ugh, I'm not batting good averages here as far as what I'm doing on here, you can just skip all the lifestyle stuff and try to out train a bad diet and a bad lifestyle, and you can do that for a while until you can't, and then it won't work anymore. So
right. Yeah. So I guess summarizing that one, like the workout methodology or program you're doing is one component of a very large puzzle, right? So to say one thing is or isn't right good for weight loss, right? That's just a very narrow kind of focused mindset, as opposed to ignoring the full picture that's going to go into that.
Yeah, and think about, I think, let's make some assumptions here of why like CrossFit might not be good for weight loss. In a group, it's hard to have individualized conversations. I've racked my brain a little bit on, do we do low, slow 60-minute aerobic pieces a few days a week, and then do our coaches do we just chat? I mean, is that it's not the ideal, but it's a start. It's a start in group classes to have conversations around this kind of stuff and figure out why or why not individuals are, dealing with behavior issues. But in a group setting, it's hard to have those conversations. So you don't see that it's integrated and foundational in group programming. It's just always like a side hustle very often in a CrossFit gym. It's like, we've got training and then we've got our nutrition program. And we do have a nutrition program, but it doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be super complicated, especially when you're doing group stuff. It can be, right? But I think that's the reason a lot of times that people will say CrossFit isn't good for weight loss is that, they either get injured before they get a chance to, get to train sustainably for a long period of time, or they're going in and training and expecting that ignoring the rest of that stuff is going to bring them to where they want to, right?
Right. Yeah. This is going to fix all the other shit in my life, right? This is it, right? As opposed to looking at it from the holistic, the big picture.
Yeah. It's hard to have one of these without the other to certain degrees. Yeah.
Right.
So next one, HIIT, high intensity interval training, is good for weight loss. And yeah, that's true in certain cases, I would say. I guess one of our, it feels like a cop-out answer, but it really makes it, it's true. And it depends in a lot of different cases, right?
Right.
But what is HIT? So if somebody comes to me and they're like, is HIT good for weight loss? First, we need to get on the same page with our language and what you think HIT is and what I think HIT is. You say something, then I need to ask and get clarification so that we're both on the same page here. And very often HIT started with the Tabata Izumi, 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, 8 sets, high interval. I can't remember, it was 8 sets. Yeah, it's 8 sets, wasn't it? It was, 8, and then you rest and do, more. I can't remember how many sets and
Right.
specifics of the study. I can pull them back up, but I think it's important to know that, like, why does HIT work? HIT works because exercise works because the body responds and adapts to stress. Okay. HIT is stressful. Okay. So you'll see adaptations really quickly, and that high stress can only be maintained for so long. And when you have a group of general population people, when I say general population, by the way, just I think to myself, people looking not to compete, not to do anything super crazy. They're just here to get healthy, feel good, live a long life, larger life, be able to do the things they want in their day to day. And they're not like a group of 20 Navy SEALs, right? That's not Gen Pop.
Right.
So they have a lot of stressors. They have kids, they have jobs, they've got other things going on as well too. And it's a better play to keep this stuff in extremely small doses for them.
Yeah, I think a lot of this too stemmed from the studies coming about, like the metabolic effect from these short, high intense efforts, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, there's this great metabolic effect from this that's could be more potent. And it's going to be better than aerobic or strength training. So let's only do HIT, and that's where I think a lot of these programs come out, because they looked at one little piece, which we're going to get into a little bit as far as like the sustainability of this, kind of just looking at one small detail and then expanding it out into a whole. That's how you train all the time.
Yeah, HIT all the time, all day, every workout. I need to be laying on the ground. I need to get them sweet endorphins too, right? I got to get mine. Yeah, that's another topic as well too. Just training purely for endorphins, getting addicted to exercise. That's another one that my exercise, that's another myth we'll look to bust later on, is my exercise wasn't effective if I didn't sweat or fall down on the floor afterwards, which is incredibly untrue, but we'll touch that one later. But HIT too much too long can cause metabolic disruption for however long somebody has genetics enough to handle it, right? And their lifestyle. You can lose mental acuity. You have compensatory patterns, so it can cause bad sleep. And now you're putting a coffee in place to crush that up, and now you're in a cycle, right? Yeah. Who should or could do HIT work? Competitors, CrossFit competitors, mixed modal competitors, combat sports, marathon runners, and this is assuming that they can handle it, right? If I had somebody that came to me that wanted to do combat sports, but their lifestyle was shit, I wouldn't give them HIT work until their stress cup was at a point where I'm like, okay, you can handle this for your sport. Otherwise, I'd be doing more damage, right? Yeah. What's a better option? Yeah. What we just talked about, right? What will you do for losing weight? And I think does it work? Yes, but that's not what we're going at. Does it work for the rest of your life? Is it sustainable? Can you keep this up and do it day in, day out? Or are you just hanging on? Strength training and easy aerobic work creates that broader base of fitness, and it'll progress them, I'd say, in a more sustainable way. So,
yeah, I mean, we've seen it with members as well as ourselves, kind of do the more kind of ass kicker workouts every day, and just how long we're able to keep that up. At the end of the day, like you said, sustainability is the goal, and sustainable because over time, that's what's going to add up, right? So you're not doing the yo-yo dieting or yo-yo exercising program. I'm going from this to that, to this, to that, always searching for that next thing, just because I can't sustain it. And it's one of those things, like anything works for a certain period of time, right? There's a novel stimulus, right? So it's gonna work for a little bit. And then from there, like it's not gonna work, especially if it's unsustainable, right? Because you're gonna fizzle out, whether it's because you're not getting the results because of you're overly stressed on the body, things like that, and the work that that's creating, or like you're getting injured, or you just can't do it right. So then that didn't work for you because you couldn't sustain it, and then you're on to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've definitely, I mean, it's talking to, when you say on to the next thing, and one of the things that we do when someone comes in here is they start with a conversation with us, tell us about what you've done and why that did or did not work, and what's brought you here to this point, right? What are your thoughts and perceptions and beliefs around training? And yeah, and we definitely have seen that a lot. Well, I've tried all of these things and none of them are working. Or, I've definitely talked to people that are like, I've tried CrossFit and it didn't work, or it injured me. And yeah, a lot of questions underneath that too. And I think like an underlying topic on both losing weight and HIIT is marketing. Like, where are you hearing that HIIT is good for weight loss? Was it your friend? Was it a T Nation article? Was it where are you hearing that stuff, and where are they pulling that from, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's got such a crazy influence on people. My friend did this, and and we don't always have time. I would say always time, but like the opportunity is not always there to have a deeper discussion around it. So yeah. This one's verbatim. This next one, it's verbatim. So CrossFit will get you a man body. And what I'm making the assumption here is that like, this was a female that said it, and that all of a sudden, like you're just blown up and you look like The Rock after 6 months, which, man, yeah, we'd be crazy busy, right? If that were the truth, right?
Is that easy?
Yeah. If it were only that easy to build muscle, right? Everyone would be just jacked and beautiful and running around, like us, right? Just kidding. But I think that what was meant here is that you'll gain a lot of muscle and you will look, incredibly muscular from doing this training. And this implies a couple things: leanness, in which case see what is needed for weight loss, and muscular growth. Okay. Muscular growth, we'll talk about what is needed for that in a minute. But marketing, where are people seeing this, Carl?
Yeah, so we have this conversation earlier, I guess pre-production. What jumped to mind, I guess, as far as where they're getting this image is the CrossFit Games, right? That is what was the poster child for CrossFit for the longest time, and they have tried to rebrand away from that and not have that be their driving force. But I mean, you have these women out there that are the 1% of the 1%, right? They're up there, right? As far as the genetics, they're doing this as a profession. They are at this point professional athletes. They sleep, eat, drink, train, all with that in mind to be at the peak of performance, right? And performance is not necessarily equal health. So that was my first image, is where women are seeing, they're seeing the Annie Thor's daughters, the Tia Claire Tomei, the Catherine David's daughters of the world, right? And maybe they associate that with looking manliness, and they're thinking, okay, if I do CrossFit, that they're going to look like that, right? And who knows how long, right? But not understand there's a delineation between CrossFit sport and CrossFit, the just general health and wellness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's exactly where people see it in CrossFit is, the competitors, because that was, like you said, that was their angle a few years ago. It was all competitive athletes. And it seemed like it was unspoken, but that was the trajectory. Start CrossFit, eventually compete. And every box, hey, let's do these competitions. Let's sign up for competitions. There's nothing wrong with competitions. It gives people a goal to work for. I think there's, again, boom, there's another subtopic right there. But like, that doesn't have to be for health and longevity. Like, competing in the games is not the eventual goal, right?
Right.
And those people, well, we'll get to that in just a second. But even if you look at other marketing, that's a style of marketing, is to show people the aspirational, right? The before and the after, the aspirational, the jacked person. This X style of training gets you here. And then the best of the best. RP does this a lot too. That's like the best of the people that are getting really good results. And is this sustainable? Are they weighing and measuring forever? Right? Are they continually doing this? Are they learning how to eat and staying there? I'd be curious about that a little bit more, but they're showing the best of the best and the shredded people that are, you know, getting good results out of it.
And then I guess another place, maybe not where they're seeing it, but maybe where they're hearing it. Maybe they had a friend or something like that. They had a relative or someone like, oh, I did CrossFit and I gained muscle, right? I got bigger, right? My shirt fit tighter or something like that. And that may come from just a misunderstanding of maybe what's happening, right? For traditionally, and this has changed a lot over the 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, and CrossFit's had a big impact on this, but just traditionally weight training for women, right, was just go do aerobics, go do some sort of machine. And there wasn't a whole lot of resistance training in it, right? There wasn't a whole lot of high protein diet. So it's probably low fat, low carb, right? Or high, moderate carb, low protein, low fat diets where they didn't have the substrate to like create, right, muscle. So I think CrossFit also changed that a little bit with introducing resistance training and higher protein diets where, yeah, maybe compared to what was made traditional, right? Maybe you are going to put on some more muscle compared to that. But as far as like being, yeah, this shredded, jacked woman is not going to happen as soon as you pick up a weight.
Yeah, man. But if it would, remember, man, going back to that, if it were only that easy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, who are they hearing it from? Their friend. And maybe they did have a friend, but what does her history look like? You know, what is your friend's history? What do her parents look like? Are her parents jacked? Did she have a history of sports? Has she already have like a really high trading age? So that's really important to know, is that like, who's your person and how are you different? And what does that look like? What does that entire history look like? Yeah. Yeah. So that's, you know, where individuals are seeing it and who they hear it from and other things like training age and genetics and things like that go into it. But what does it take to grow muscle? Well, it takes time and patience and volume and basic lifestyle guidelines that we mentioned. You need strength to build lean muscle mass because you need to be capable of breaking down muscle. And then you need to recover from that. And then you need to be able to adapt over time to handle more and more volume. Volume's typically the name of the game when it comes to hypertrophy. And the wider the base of basic lifestyle guidelines, the better your genetics, the more you'll reach your max physical potential. You know, also biological age and stuff like that, and hormones have, I mean, everything to do with it as well too. But that will get you closer and closer to, I would say, just gaining muscle. Strength also doesn't mean muscle. They kind of interplay with each other, but just because you're stronger doesn't mean you gain muscle. Just because you gain muscle doesn't mean you're stronger, or you can express that, you know, as well too. So yeah. Any thoughts on what it takes? Have I missed anything on what it takes? I mean, I know those broad overarching on what it takes to grow muscle, but
Yeah. No, I think that hits everything pretty well. And these are usually pretty highly conservative efforts, right? They're making these decisions, right? They're training for that certain way. Whereas, like I said, we look at general population, right? They're not going to be doing these high volume multiple workouts in a day or this or that. They have their hour, right? Usually to get things in. And it's hard to accomplish a lot of that to get like major hypertrophy for a lot of people.
yeah. You said an hour. Always brings me back to that, like, why an hour? Why train an hour? An hour because it's the marketable, it's an hour. We'll get you in and out in an hour. Why not? What is it? Why not 4-minute abs?
Yeah.
You're over here with your 5-minute abs. I got 4-minute abs. You're going to be getting abs in 4 minutes. Yeah. In personalized fitness, when we write it, we combine their goals, what they're capable of and what they can recover from, along with how much time they have. So if they do have 3 30-minute blocks in a week, or they have 2 hours a day or multiple sessions, right? Those just different, we can use what time and weigh that against their goals. But in this, you have 60 minutes to grow muscle, if that's the goal, right?
And that's not to say that you can't put on muscle mass within general population classes and things like that, but just the far extreme of that spectrum of hypertrophy, I think, is where I think the misconception comes from.
Yeah, I got on a tangent there for a minute with my time rant, but like, yeah, you can definitely, with what time we have, you can definitely grow muscle. And again, that's relative to who you are and how much muscle that you have and how much volume you've built up. At a certain point, something will have to give. But yeah, I guess if you were to paint this in the practical application, you're going in and you're doing resistance training, usually not strength speed or speed strength work, usually not. The best thing is you're going to be doing absolute strength. Okay, that's kind of this foundational thing. You might do aerobic work for some good recovery, good blood movement, and you sleep a lot. You have really good digestion. You've got really low stress, and you're lifting weights with the intent to break it down. Yeah, that's what that looks like. So, yeah, and form follows function too. If I start boxing, I'll probably see some changes to my shoulder. Depending on the gym that you're at, if they do upper body work 3 times a week and you happen to be a person who maybe it's a low neuromuscularly efficient female who handles and responds really well to upper body work, that person may blow up. So like when you say like CrossFit, gosh, there's so much in that. Like, what does the week look like? Why is the week designed the way it is? When are you showing up? I'm not going to get upper body strong by doing squats 3 times a week. Maybe if you're a novice, but then eventually that'll peter out, right? So, yeah. Our last one, CrossFit will get you injured. So this is always a big one. Yeah. How do people get injured? Catastrophe. You're just walking and you roll your ankle in something, right? A previous injury is always a good indicator, and that's usually because they haven't rehabbed themselves and regained motor control. So they'll have limitations or changes in motor control. They'll compensate because of the previous injury, or they'll have altered movement patterns because of that previous injury. A lot of asymmetry in motion, altered motor control in general without a previous injury, increased BMI increases the risk for it. High risk taking behaviors, like, I don't know, playing rugby, right? Carl? Yeah. Carl's retired now. And then you combine that with lifestyle that I would say just is shit, just to be frank about it. You got poor movement patterns, and you've got a lot of asymmetries, and you're doing high intense stuff with not really a good foundation to recover. But I would say one of the big reasons in training in CrossFit, this is what I see. We've seen this so much. People are doing things outside of their capabilities, and that's hard in a group program design. Group program design, you put out a design and they scale it or they modify it. But there's so much more to that, even if you have a group of 10 or 15 or 20 people, right? Sometimes it's a triage situation in that. And people can feel like, oh, because I'm not doing on the board, I'm not RX'd, and that's the goal, that I am less than. And this is why we really started moving into some personalized fitness stuff as well too. In the group program design, as long as you're getting what you're capable of, it's not too fast, it's not too much volume, and it's not too complex for you, then you'll be on the safer side. So, and per our prior gymnastics and Olympic weightlifting conversations, I'll give you some examples, right? So you can't pass a scratch test, right? You can't get overhead well, but you want to snatch, and all of a sudden you're doing 75 snatches for time. You can't do a strict pull-up, but you want to kip, and you can get a few kipping pull-ups, right? So you start doing, tons and tons of kipping pull-ups in your workout. Or you can't do a toe touch, but you're doing touch and go power cleans from the floor. Those are all things that you see in a lot of CrossFit gyms, where you're giving these people, they haven't earned the right of absolute strength or control over their movement and flexibility. They haven't earned that right to move on to complexity, to move on to faster speeds, and the higher the complexity, I would say, the more the need to assess to see where they're at,
Yeah, I mean, kind of one thing, the analogy I always liked was kind of like just like the martial arts, right? Or there's like jujitsu or something like that. There's usually a belt system in there, right? You don't walk in on day one expecting to do black belt shit, right? Because you're not ready. You're gonna get hurt, or you're gonna hurt somebody else. There are steps and progresses along the way that happen to get you to that, right? Whereas in CrossFit, for a long time, it was just like these movements exist, so therefore you should do them, or you should be able to do them, or you need to do them. But what we've realized over the years that like these do exist, yes, but it's right for the right person at the right time, for the right goals and things like that, and doing high volume kipping on the toes-to bar or pull-ups that people just aren't ready, right? Once again, it'll work, right? Until it doesn't, and you're going to break down, and then you're going to spin out. Or same thing with Olympic weightlifting. Like, it's a powerful tool and people can do it, but same thing, do you need to be doing 50 muscle snatches, right, to be fit, to be able to just go about your everyday life? And that's always the lens we got to paint it through, right? Because when we're looking at through our general population, right, just to be able to experience life to the fullest, those aren't there, but yet people see these things and been told that like that you can or you need to do these, but not realizing the steps that need to lead up to that.
Yeah, the steps needed, the patience, the fast tracking that gets you to the next thing. Is that I've heard that from a high level CrossFit coach as well too. Hey, you think your person might be able to get in a muscle up, throw them in a workout and just let them get after it. Well, how irresponsible is that? Yeah. And there's varying degrees of that, but like, you don't go from getting one muscle up in isolation to doing a 20-minute AMRAP of 2 muscle ups, 4 kipping handstand push-ups, and 8 kettlebell swings, right? That's a standard CrossFit workout right there. And that's fast tracking. You learn the muscle up by itself in isolation, and you stay there until you've built up the volume that you need, right? Everything's pretty, everything's beautiful. You've done the reps, right? Then you do it with a higher breathing rate. And then you do it with other movements that maybe complement it well. Maybe you're biking and doing maybe, I was gonna say push-ups. That's not super complimentary, but maybe you're doing some ski erg, biking, and then you're doing that. And then you can start to get into more non-complementary movements, like you're doing burpees and muscle ups, right? And then it just keeps going and going. You can see that how people get fast tracked. They just jump right into that,
Right.
Yeah. And I think that really covers that main one too, of like, how will CrossFit get you injured? Of just doing shit that you are not capable of, not I guess not being willing to adjust, not communicating, pain, like pain's gain, right? Just ignore it, move on. That's a horrible idea as well too, right? Yeah, gosh, I think that's about it.
Yeah, actually, I got one more. I think that might contribute to it as well, as far as the CrossFit was, and we've gone away from it. I think some others have gone, but just the competition. Every day is a competition, right? In the leaderboard, right? I think there's something right to be in the group class, to have some sort of motivation, like working next somebody else and having maybe a little push that you wouldn't get by yourself. But when competition is one of the main focuses, right? I think Greg Glassman had the phrase, "What men will die for points."
Yeah.
So when that is a major component of the fitness program, right? You're going to take, not everybody, I can't speak now for but people are going to take risk that they normally wouldn't, right? Because it's competitiveness. There's people within you, right? And some people can ignore that, but a lot of people, like, they're looking around, they have it, they're going to score on the board. They say, this person did this morning, I'm going to try to beat that person. And they make sacrifices, right? Whether it's their range of motion or doing things outside their capabilities because they want to have that, used to be the RX or this or that. So I think the competition aspect of it, when it's not necessary, it's like I'm throwing you into an intramural sport. Like, you're not here for sport, you're here for health and fitness.
Yeah.
So I think that's another component within the CrossFit realm that that can contribute to that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, that was our the big crisis of when we pulled the leaderboard off the wall. We pulled the tracking and we said, hey, track in your own journals, track your own stuff. First off, with our training sessions, when you've got an A1, A2, B1, D2 of resistance, and you've got 4 sets of each, that's a lot of numbers and reps and sets and stuff to write down, to track, right? You're going to sit there and write all of that stuff on the board, and to what end? So someone else can see someone else and then compensate, right? The leaderboard is good when you're competing because you need to know what the end goal is. You need to know what you need for rate of contraction and load, and gives you something to work toward, right? But that's the eventual goal. That's what training needs to be designed. But training, even with competitors, starts with what you're capable of,
Right.
and then it works towards that as a guidepost. Yeah, like you said, what we saw in leaderboards was cutting corners, was, by any means necessary. Hey guys, we want this to be sustainable. Nope. Because this person next to me, I'm going to Seabiscuit it. I'm just, as soon as I see him, I need to send it. And you just see all kinds of poor behaviors because of that. And I just as soon would write a question on the board to ask people how much water they've had to drink today, or if they're chewing their food right. I feel like that's going to be far more beneficial on that. Yeah, maybe motivation is another, that's another topic for another time, where you're saying like the leaderboard is a motivator, where I guess motivation will start you, but it doesn't keep you there. Inspiration does, right? Why are you doing what you're doing in a deep down way? And it's not our job to, well, you know what? We'll save this for another one. Is it our job to motivate to a certain degree, right? But that's it. That's it for the day.
Cool.
Everyone, thanks for tuning in. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us, Carl@CrossFitSouthBend.com or Brandon@CrossFitSouthBend.com. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Cool. Thanks.